Hello, everyone. I'm Robbie Swale, and this is the 12-Minute Method podcast. And in this podcast, I'm going to be investigating how we can beat procrastination, be more productive, and finally do those things we have been meaning to do. And in season one, what that means is I'm going to be reflecting on a number of things that I mostly first wrote about together in one place in the About the Author section of the 12-Minute Method books, in book one in particular. These are things that over my life I have procrastinated on, thought I might not get done, and then finally done in the end. And in each episode, I'll spend up to 12 minutes reflecting on one of those things and sharing those reflections with you, hoping to identify patterns, things that you can use, ways that you can finally do the things that you've been meaning to do. Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 12. And as you might have, if you just listened to episode 11, you might have heard the origin of this episode. It happened midway through. I suddenly thought, I could do an episode about meditation. So I think this episode, once we've reflected on episode 11, and I've pulled out some of the insights and some of the extra things that jumped out at me from that, we're going to have an experimental 12-minute method podcast episode where I'm going to talk about meditation. And then if I've got time, I'm going to talk about gratitude. And if I've got time, I'm going to talk about riding a bike. And otherwise, riding a bike might make it into the last episode of the series or something like that. So, first of all, to reflect on episode 11, I think it's worth just saying a couple of things about the book, The Power to Choose, which I referenced there. So I was talking to Jennifer Garvey-Berger on the Coach's Journey podcast, the October episode of that, about this. It emerged from my coaching engagement with Joel, right? Like, how rich an engagement was that? So the same place that practice emerged from. Joel said, what would you like to meet? If we were to meet up at Christmas, it was September or at the time or August. If we were to meet up at Christmas, what would you love to tell me? And from nowhere came out of me that I'd written a book. And he said, well, what would that, what's a question that's occupying you? And it was, is this new mindset, this new way of seeing the world that I'm developing valid? And so there is a book which is about that, which has been through many, many redrafts and moved from being about 15,000 words to being about 90,000 words, has had help from a whole range of people, including particularly Alex Swallow, Steve Creek again, Lily Kambata, and more. And Joni Svart, who I mentioned in the last episode. So loads of people have helped me with that book. And I'm sorry to all of you that it's not out there yet. Talking to Jennifer about it in that episode, you can listen to that. It's one of my favorite Coach's Journey podcast episodes just come out. Made me think that probably 2023 will be the year for The Power to Choose. But also during COVID, because it's a book really about a mindset to deal better with complexity, I released the first part of it. So you can read the first, half of the book really is available for free on my website. I'll put a link again in the show notes. It was in the show notes for the last episode as well. You can download a PDF or a Word document of that book, or you can read them on my website or on LinkedIn. So check that out. It is worth pulling out from episode 11, all those reflections about the books, that trick I use on myself about audience. So one of the reasons I don't share my work is all the stories I tell myself that it's not it won't reach enough people, it's not important. And as the wisdom of David Gemmel's story in episode 2 spells out, key for me is that trick. Well, is it worth it? How many people need to get a benefit from this for me to have been worthwhile me sharing it? And the answer is 1. But there's another one, which is like, I'm not doing this thing. Who's benefiting from that? Is it me? No, not really, because the people that would want to learn about my work can't learn about it. Is it the people who want to learn about my work? No. So who's benefiting? No one. So I better do it. There were 2 tensions in there. Is it resistance or not resistance to spend time publishing a book, to spend time setting up a mailing list? Is it, and the other one was, good is having it out by Christmas, better is to work with the publisher. And those tensions, is it resistance? Is it my soul calling? And is it better to have it out or better to have it better? Those are tricky tensions. And I just think reflecting, they're just things we have to wrestle with if we're going to make these things, and kind of feel into them quite a lot, trust our intuition. I just caught that I talked in that episode about sending proposals to publishers, and I was able to apply from that things I'd learned in my coaching business. So the proposal is success, right? Sending the thing to the publisher counts as something worth celebrating, not the result from that, because I can't control that. There was also some nice little mindset tricks that I think it was actually me. I think I said it was Katie Harvey last time. I think it was her listening that created this for me, but I think it actually came from me. Katie, if you listen, let me know what you think. Which was kind of sounds like the sort of thing Robbie would do to send this off to at least a couple of publishers. It doesn't sound like the sort of thing I would do, or at least I would want to do, to not send it to any. So to find out what happens if I send it to some publishers, because getting a deal from HarperCollins is better than self-publishing, probably, for a book reaching the most people, which is most of what I was interested in. Another one that was in there was kind of, what would I say to someone else about doing this thing? And those are two great mind tricks. You can write out the answers to that. Sometimes it's enough to just say, oh, yeah. Sometimes I play a trick on myself, like, if I was already a successful coach, if I was already a successful author, what would I do? And it's like, oh, I would just send it to some people, wouldn't I? But I'd also have a self-respect. I wouldn't send it to like 1 million. I wouldn't send it to people who I didn't want to work with. Those kind of things. A thing that I forgot about was a really key moment in like deciding that self-publishing was a great option for me was a book that my brother-in-law, Andrew, gave me. And the family, but I think Andrew chose it, and his family, but I think Andrew chose it. And it was a book by a guy called David Cochran. I think it's called Let's Get Digital. And it was the first time I'd really heard anyone make the case, not just that self-publishing was a good alternative to traditional publishing, but that actually it was the best alternative for most people, or many, many people. And hearing that story told in that way was quite big for me. It's like, often it's really useful for me to get, one of the things that Jennifer Garvey-Berger talks about in her book, Unlocking Leadership Mind Traps, is we get trapped by simple stories. And hearing someone tell the alternative story is really good for me to shake myself out of a simple story. So I had a simple story about traditional publishing, that was the only real option, the only thing self-respecting people did that. Despite I knowing that wasn't true, rationally, I still actually subconsciously held that story. And reading Cochran's book gave me an alternative, which is actually the only thing self-respecting entrepreneurial authors would do is self-publish. And his book is great for that. And I'd love to talk to more people about that, tell that story more. So I might do that another time. And that's, of course, true because the world of publishing is massively disrupted. So it's worth saying that makes things harder. A lot of the things on the internet make things harder. It used to be that if you wanted to be an actor or you wanted to be a publisher or you wanted to be on TV, a TV presenter, you had to go through a certain set of hoops to get there. And there were gatekeepers on those hoops, as Seth Godin would say. Now you can do anything. With a mobile phone, you can have your own TV channel on YouTube. You can publish a book on Amazon with a Word document or the PDF or a Word document. They'll even design your cover for you, although I think you should probably pay somebody to design your cover. You can do any of those things yourself. And then the choice is, do you want to? And how do you make those choices? And that's hard. And that's where a lot of creative projects, in my view, stumble and sometimes fall. So that is some reflections on episode 11. The timer is already set up for 12 minutes. So I'm going to press go and talk at first about meditation. So like a lot of people, I had an interesting journey with meditation. And essentially, I knew about it for a long time because my mum, for pretty much as long as I can remember, was connected to a Buddhist community in the UK. My dad also had probably 10 years of being very closely linked. So my mum was connected to Rigpa. My dad was very closely linked with Thich Nhat Hanh's order in the UK. Some of you might have heard of him. And so I was very aware of mindfulness and meditation. And I did a meditation class once in London, and it didn't quite work for me. And then as time went on, and as I got into personal development and coaching and seeing things differently, I kind of knew that it was a thing I should probably investigate more. And then I didn't do anything about that. Now, it's a little bit different to some of the other stories. It wasn't something I'd wanted to do forever. But it is something that's undeniably good for me. And what's been interesting is I have never done it in the way that I think that you're supposed to do it. So this is one of the things that I think stopped me doing it. The way you're supposed to do it is every morning you get up like an hour earlier than you otherwise would, or you create an hour of space and you spend an hour sitting and breathing or with some beads or something else. I didn't really know what those other things were, like mantras. And I heard people on the Tim Ferriss show talking about these kind of practices. And my brother talking about it and all these kind of things. And I didn't do it. And then here's how I started meditating. And it took me a long time to even start calling it meditating. But basically, Joel, again, so much to Joel Monk, he said, I think you should develop a practice to get yourself ready for your coaching sessions. About 5 minutes. And I was like, oh, okay. And I quite liked the idea of it. And I just kind of, again, like Joel was a great mentor as well as a coach, I just trusted that he was onto something there. So I created one. And it was basically created from a bunch of things that I had thought about. So particularly it was created from, at first, box breathing that I'd learned from Brene Brown at a talk in London in 2015 and been really affected by. Really simple exercise. Breathe in over a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, breathe out for a count of 4, hold out for a count of 4. So it was that. I was doing that a couple of times. Then it was saying some lyrics to myself. Joel said, maybe you should have some poetry in it. And there's an amazing middle 8 of a Frank Turner song called I Knew Proof Rock Before He Got Famous. Brilliant title, amazing song. If you want to look up the lyrics, it's the bit that starts, life is about love, last minutes and lost evenings. So I would say that to myself aloud if I was by myself, or quietly if I wasn't. Then I would spend another 5 minutes breathing in that way. And that was the start of the practice, I think. And then, no, it wasn't, because we'd done some work. So I was going to do this before every coaching session. And Joel and I had done some work about, maybe this is where it came from, about what I'd said that this bit of coaching that I'd done had felt amazing, felt like the kind of coaching I wanted to do all the time. And so we did an exercise to really get into that. What did that feel like? What was it like? So in the practice that I did, the box breathing would go around a couple of times. I would say the lyrics, then I would breathe in and imagine that feeling of coaching this woman come into me, and breathe out, imagining the person that I was about to speak to. So I was really trying to embody that moment of amazing coaching that I had created with this client and bring it to the conversation I was about to have. And I did that a few times. And then one day I was coaching somebody and I was feeling all over the place, anxious, lots of thoughts. And I knew that wasn't ideal for coaching. And I did the exercise and it really changed that. And then I did the coaching and it was a great coaching session, one I was really proud of. And so that was when I knew I needed to keep this practice going. Now that practice has evolved over time. It's different now to how it was then. And I also added in a practice that Joel had given me, which was an easier practice, a kind of centering practice. I can probably put a link to that in the show notes. I keep meaning to create a video of both these practices so that people can use them. But essentially, it was an eyes open centering practice, which really helped me because sometimes I was coaching in walking to coaching across a bridge, and I was like, you can do it on the bridge, you can do it on the train. Meditation doesn't have to be sitting down in a room on a cushion with some beads and a bell. It can be whatever you want it to be. It's kind of meditation, mindfulness exercise. The apps like Headspace and what's the Sam Harris one, whatever that's called now, Wake Up, I think it was called, or Wake App, and that. They help you with this as well because they're great for doing anywhere. So that was really powerful. And then I got started, right? Then I had a meditation practice. And the more I coached, the more I meditated. And then it became really, and my coaching seemed better when I meditated, especially when I did a full 10 minutes. I squeeze it quite a lot these days. I'm not sure quite why that is. And that became the way that I did it. And my practice, the practices that I do has evolved, but trying to hold that 10 minutes, minimum 5 minutes, if at all possible, for coaching, before coaching sessions is a really good way. Again, like I said last time, tying a habit to something else you'll definitely do with a reason for doing it then is a really good way of creating a new habit. What else do I want to say about that? So one of the things I do, sometimes if I don't have the time for the practice before a coaching session, I do it in the coaching session with the client because they almost always really like that, because everyone pretty much would benefit from slowing down more. Another thing just to say about meditation, and then I'm going to flip to gratitude for the second half of the 12 minutes, I think, is when I'm getting my daughter to sleep, I realized it was a really important time. I couldn't tell, especially when she was a really little baby and I was carrying her against my chest. I didn't know who was making who anxious because I was stressed out because she wasn't going to sleep and she might be crying. Was that making her anxious? And so I started to really focus on breathing in those times. And it helps me. And again, it helps me do some meditation or mindfulness practice. And I think it helps her. My wife actually started doing it first, and maybe I'd been talking about something like this. I'd like to take credit, but I think it's probably just her. She said she's changing her breathing, and that was really affecting it. And I think that was happening with Leah too. When I changed when Emma changed her breathing, the baby changed her breathing. And when I changed my breathing, the baby changed her breathing as well. So it felt like it was really helpful for that. And again, the times when I'm just like, oh, please go to sleep, or let me leave you alone so that you can go to sleep. But Leah is 2 now, nearly 2, and is saying, no, come back. Basically, stroke my back. I can do some breathing and it calms me down. And there I often do a breathing technique that I learned about, on maybe I'm going to do, I'm just seeing the time ticking away. I'm not sure I'm going to get to gratitude totally today, so maybe I'll slow down on meditation. Feels like apt that I should slow down on a meditation episode. So now quite often when I'm with Leah, what I do is I breathe in for 4 and out for 8, or in for 3 and out for 8, or I just focus on, here was the thing. So that is something I learned about from a piece about how to hack the vagus nerve, which is part of the nervous system that turns us from our threat mode, feeling under threat, to feeling in a social connection mode. And if you breathe in for half in, and then out for twice as long, that helps you move into the connection parts of our biology. It's also connected to the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, but I forget which one is which. Whichever one, though, is the one you want to be in, is triggered by breathing out. And so that's part of why it happens. But another thing that with meditation that really helped with me is I was like, what am I supposed to be doing? I'm just counting breaths. I don't know. And then someone told me that if you just pay attention to the place where you feel your breath going in through your nose. And that was way easier for me. And then another insight that was super useful for me came from Tim Ferriss, which was, he said he didn't realize that it's really important for him to know what the rep is. So he likes exercise. It's like the rep is when you, if you're at the gym, it's when you lift the weight up, or it's when you do the burpee or do the press up. And the number of reps you do is a sign of how well you're exercising. Or often, you can do too many. But the key thing, his insight about meditation, which is so useful for me, is the rep is bringing your attention back to your breath, or to whatever you're focusing on, to the feeling of the peak coaching experience, to the box breathing, to that bit of skin where you can feel your breath going in and out through your nose. So like, every time you bring it back, that's a success. So, because what used to happen to me in meditation or mindfulness before is, I would realize I wasn't doing it. Then my thoughts would go to, oh, I'm not paying attention to my breath. What is going on here? What an idiot. Why can't I do this simple thing? This is pointless. I should give up. And as soon as I knew no, success is, the thing to practice is bringing my attention back to my breath, bringing my attention back to my nervous system in the centering exercise, to what's arising, then that made things a lot easier. And instead of beating myself up, I could just stay with it. So it's just keep coming back. That's the practice. The more times I come back, the better. That was a real shift for me. And that actually led to a really important insight about commitment, which for me is that when you're trying to train yourself to keep a commitment, to keep a habit, the absolutely key moment, the rep of commitment, is when you've slipped. So when you've had a day or a coaching session when I don't do my meditation, what do I do next time? Do I recommit, which is the rep of commitment, of building up the ability to commit, or do I give up? And recommitting, again, it's like, that's the rep, that's success. Every time you recommit, you're training yourself to commit to things, to keep commitments. The same with mindfulness. Every time you bring your attention back, you're training yourself to bring your attention back, to keep it focused. You're never going to keep your attention focused. I remember hearing Rainn Wilson, who plays Dwight in the US version of The Office, talking about this. You're never going to keep your attention that long when you're meditating. He says no, he doesn't say this as Dwight. He says this as himself. So it's like, if you can do it for a few seconds, that's amazing. But mostly you'll be just constantly bringing your attention back to the thing. But that's the rep, as Ferriss would say. And so that's important. It's also worth saying that I remember Joel saying to me with the centering practice he did, which again, I'll put a link to, that like it took about 2 or 3 years before he started seeing the results of it. Now, that wasn't quite true for me, but after 2 or 3 years, I did start to see with the centering practice. So I saw the meditation results with my coaching straight away, and that was important. But with the centering practice, which is more about opening up the nervous system and allowing whatever comes up, the sounds, the sights, the sensations, allowing yourself to notice them, training yourself to really be an instrument for what's happening in the world. That did take me a couple of years. And after a couple of years, I started to notice my peripheral vision getting better, all these things changing because of the practice. So look, I know many people want to start a meditation practice. Many people know how useful it is. And I hope that this episode, which, maybe I'll come back to gratitude next time, maybe not. But I hope this episode has really helped you to think about, and I hope it helps you start a meditation practice. And that's part of that's because there's a great bit in one of my favorite books by one of my favorite authors, Jonathan Haidt, in his book, The Happiness Hypothesis. He says this amazing thing, which is like, if there was a medication which was all natural ingredients, no side effects, it would improve your mental health, improve your resilience, lower your stress, improve your physical health, would you take it? This pill exists. It is meditation. And so the evidence for meditation is so strong. And look, in some ways, I'd love it if I did silent retreats every week, and if or every month or whatever, and I did an hour of meditation every day. I'm sure that would be better. But like a lot of this series, a small practice tied onto my coaching is much better than doing nothing. And so I'm sure that contributes to my mental health. And I notice that I feel less stressed on days when I do a lot of coaching. And I think that's partly because coaching is actually a mindfulness exercise, because I have to keep bringing my attention back to the person I'm coaching. But it's also because I do these little mindfulness practices before every session. So I'm wishing you a wonderful rest of the day, and I hope to have you back with us on the 12-Minute Method podcast sometime soon. Okay, just a couple more things before you head out to whatever else you've got going on in the rest of your day. If you want to find out a bit more about me or sign up to my mailing list, you can do that at www.robbieswale.com. If you want to read the 12-Minute Method books, you can find out more about them on my website. You can find them on Amazon, and you can find them in lots of other bookshops and booksellers around the world. You might want to come and join the 12-Minute Method Facebook group. You can find that by searching for the 12-Minute Method on Facebook, or there's links on my website. And you can find some other people there who are interested in doing work that matters to them and finally doing the things that they want to do. You can find me on lots of social media platforms. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so you might want to find me there. And most of all, I'd love to hear from you, especially if something that I've made has inspired you to finally do something you've been meaning to do for a long time. Hearing those stories are some of the most meaningful things for me in my work. And so they help me keep going when I might want to give up. So I'd love to hear from you. But most of all, I'd love it if you did that thing that matters to you, that you've been meaning to do.